אני מבקש להזמין את קוטי צבא ממשרד הרווחה. אני רק אציין למקרה שזה לא עבר בתרגום, תעלה קוטי בבקשה, שכשהחבר'ה כאן מדברים על RCT או Randomized Clinical Trial, זה איזשהו קיצור לרעיון של לעשות ניסויים רחבי היקף, שבהם קבוצה מסוימת מקבלת טיפול כמו שאנחנו חושבים שהוא טיפול אפקטיבי, וקבוצה אחרת זהה לה אינה מקבלת את הטיפול הזה, כדי שיהיה אפשר לבדוק אם הטיפול שכולנו מאמינים בו אומנם מוכיח את עצמו, וככל הידוע לנו בארץ בתחום שלנו טרם נעשה אפילו ניסוי אחד.
שלום לכולם. I'm going to speak in English, so that's maybe bad news for the English speaker, but I will try to do my best. Okay. While if you look at the evidence-based practice literature during the last 15 years, something like that, since the early days of Gambriel and Gibbs and so on, and you look at the drawings that usually appear in this kind of papers, there is a tremendous shift, apparently. The pyramid on your left was a classical thing that you usually see in this kind of paper at that time. It was very clear that those guys there believed that basically the only legitimate basis for decision-making by social workers, by practitioners, should be something around research finding, with that very clear kind of hierarchy about what is knowledge about. And if you look to later writing, you find that the green layer there, background expert opinion, that was just at the very bottom of the pyramid in the past, is now apparently a legitimate ring in the Olympic ring that's Aaron just used. So we are moving, apparently we have moved from looking at expertise as something that is not well accepted to something that is part of the family. And it looks as a tremendous shift, in fact. And the question I would like to ask is that that shift, is that instrumental one, or rather is that more really epistemological kind of shift? Meaning, are we doing expertise because we know that there are a lot of obstacles for using evidence, the one you just mentioned in your slides, or is that something that is more deep? In fact, we accept now that expertise is a legitimate son in the family of the knowledge that practitioners have to use in their practice. And I must tell you that my feeling is that the shift is not, is rather instrumental rather than epistemological. And that evidence-based practice movements still believe in the pyramid, not in the Olympic rings. And I have time is short, I have two proofs to that statement. The first one is when you look at what the evidence-based practice writers and scholars have done during those 15 years, they have tried mostly to overcome the obstacles for the use of evidence. They understood that it is difficult to translate this idea of evidence-based practice into practice, so they have tried to make it simpler for practitioners. Okay? And they have done that through the tools that Aaron just mentioned. For example, the Campbell collaboration, which is the summum of the effort in that aspect, and for me a terrible site. I mean, it's very difficult to use. And I'm the kind of guy in my position that I have to use that. I have time to use that and to look at that. I don't believe that any practitioner in the field has the commodities and the time to do that. But anyway, but there are more and more user-friendly kind of evidence-based practice that appear in the UK, in the States, and so on. A lot of books about how to translate this principle of evidence-based practice into practice guideline into practice. And very often a very large effort by many universities to train social workers to use evidence. So we have the evidence is there. You cannot use that because you are not trained to. Let's train you to do that. You were part of this kind of effort, Aaron, in Colombia. Ed Mullen is doing that all the time. The idea is let's train people to use evidence. The other proof to my statement is that when you look at, when you look at the papers written by the evidence-based practice movement writers, you find that basically they are still adopting a very clear logical model or rational model kind of decision-making. Decision, according to the evidence-based practice movement, means a very systematic way of doing things. And I agree, the quote here from Aaron writing is milder compared to what the one Sackett used to write about 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But still there is this idea that decisions have to be made rationally. Well, I must tell you that to my understanding, that is not the way people make decisions. That is not the way professionals make decisions. That is not the way practitioners make decisions. Practitioners are using a much more naturalistic kind of model when they make a decision. And I would like to say something about that later on. So instead of talking about evidence-based practice, I would like to talk to you about just preliminary ideas about learning-based practice. And what is learning-based practice? To my understanding, it is something that recognizes the fact that the essential value of practitioner expertise and the necessity to structure its formation, and that practitioners are using a naturalistic kind of model of decision making when they make decisions regarding the well-being of their clients. Let me try to talk about those two ideas again. Just shortly, what do you mean when you say that practitioners use mostly a naturalistic decision making process? We mean that when a practitioner, when a professional faces a clinical situation he has to deal with, what he usually will do is to try to recognize, to use his arsenal of patterns he has in his mind, to try to recognize, to identify the cues that he can see in the case, and try to do what Gary Klein and others call the pattern matching, meaning try to use prior experience to recognize cues, to categorize situation, and to consideration, action. And when there is a ready pattern in his mind, he will apply it. And if not, he will try to kind of having a discussion, trying to change and to adopt what he has in his mind to the actual situation. And the idea, that satisficing idea, that's a term coined by Herbert Simon about 30 years ago, is that you do not look at all the options and then decide who is the best, what you call actuarial kind of thing or thinking, but we are talking about what is the first thing that seems to me that it will really work, that is good enough, that is adequate solution. This is the one that we are going to adopt. And this is something that people will do usually. I do believe that's the way they do that. And in that sense, expertise is a capacity of an expert to identify a clinical situation and to reach the first adequate solution quite rapidly, and an expert reach this kind of conclusion when usually the first option he chooses is satisfactory. So expertise is important. It is a legitimate son in the family of knowledge, but it is not without problem. Expertise takes to acquire. All this naturalistic decision-making process is something that came from experts. What do you do with novices? What do you do with people that have not this arsenal of patterns to use and to make comparison with? So it takes time to acquire. What do you do with the fact that very often expertise is tacit and unverified, and especially in this country we are reluctant to define outcomes and to measure them. In many professions, this is overcome through processes of apprenticeship. Physicians, for example, are trained mostly by looking at their elders. We do not that. I am always asking when I meet social workers, how many times do you have in your life see an expert make any kind of intervention. How many times have you seen somebody do that? It's happened very seldom. Supervision in the field is often not adequate enough. And social workers work mostly alone in dyad with the family or with the client. And nobody is there to reflect on what they are doing. And even simulation, which is very used in many professions to practice and to get expertise without actually meeting people, well, simulation of practice is extremely difficult, and it's quite unusual in the social work realm. So what do we do? Well, we're trying in the ministry to do things in order to turn experience into expertise, and to structure the experience of practitioner in order to generate expertise in a more systematic way. And those are basically the premises of this intervention. We understand that it has been done constantly and intentionally through individual, intra-organizational, and inter-organizational kind of learning. We know that we have to learn from success, and we know that we have to find a way to expose systematically and constantly the tacit knowledge people are building up during their experience in order to expose it, to share it, and in that meaning ICTs, information and communication technology are very facilitating. The time is short, and before Rami show me one of his papers, I would like to tell you something about what we are actually doing. And I want to share with you, I have 5 minutes, so that means I have 1 minute for every of those activity. Yeah, sorry.
You don't have time.
I have more than that?
No,
you don't have. Okay. So let me just try to tell you what we do in the ministry regarding our effort to build or to turn experience into expertise. We have done during the last decade a couple of things. We have tried to build a methodology that of intra-organizational learning teams. And when teams are trained to ask practical questions and to try to answer them not only through looking at evidence, but only through looking at their own practice and experience in the field. We have established about 3 or 4 years ago a very wide network of community of practice over the website of the ministries. We have already 24 communities with an enrollment about 7,000 and more social workers and others. So that's a huge part of the Israeli workforce in social work is already enrolled in this kind of communities, and people are talking and sharing knowledge during that. We have established a program of training experts to write, to training social workers with a lot of expertise to write down what they are doing in a program we call Practice Wisdom, Chokhmat Aseh in Hebrew. We have already more than 150 papers that have been written by, we have been written by practitioners with the help and guidance of my staff in order to externalize the knowledge they have get through this practice. This is in fact not a process of just externalizing what they know. The very process of writing, as everybody knows, is in fact the creation of knowledge, the reflection about own knowledge. And last but not least, the ministry is going through a very large initiative, what we call the Outcomes Initiative, which is basically something that is close to what Irving Epstein called practice-based research, trying to add a research kind of orientation into the practice of practitioners in the field, and to try to help them to make decisions regarding where they would like to bring the intervention and to what extent they have done that through the time that was given to them. The last slide is about just I'm trying to make kind of comparison between the evidence-based practice and what I'm trying to call the learning-based practice. I know that it is, again, just first idea, it's mean a lot of work, but to get you an idea of what I think. Whenever evidence-based practice is talking about evidence, we are talking about evidence and expertise. When the evidence-based practice movement is looking for the optimal solution, we are looking for the first adequate one that a practitioner can reach. When evidence-based is basically algorithmic and rational kind of decision practice, we are well aware of the importance of heuristic and expertise. Whenever the evidence-based practice think about looking for choosing among given options that are mostly proposed by the research and by the evidence that somebody can find, we think that learning-based practice is in fact about inventing and generating new responses. So the training will be, on the left side, will be about how to use evidence, and on the left side it will be about how to learn and to build expertise. And evidence-based practice, I think, still is talking more about individual decision-making process, whenever I think we should talk more about a social process, a more less linear, more organic kind of process, and the group decision-making process. I think I am okay with you. Okay? Thank you.